China, particularly when in China, there's maybe a couple of hundred biotech companies in the United States. There's probably 6,000 or 7,000, so there's a lot to pick from. So do you see any kind of difference in the smaller Chinese biotechs here versus the smaller biotechs in the United States or the UK? And if you do see it, and secondly, what do you think the smaller biotechs in China have to do to become real players on the world stage? So how's it different from your counterparts in the U.S.? And what issues do you see? What do you think has to be fixed? Is that a fair question? Okay.
Sure, probably many different aspects of how to compare Chinese versus Western biotechs. Maybe I can bring up 2 points to get started. One, I would say over the past few years, there's so much capital available in China and so many returnees coming back to China, and folks are very willing to try different things. They're willing to, I think also because the CRO industry in China is well researched, it's easy to access to a basic chemistry service, a basic biology service. It's very easy to set up a company and very easy to get a project going. So for that matter, yes, there's a lot of Me Too's, some Me Betters perhaps, but people are just so willing to get going. They may not consider long-term valuation as much as the more research company here in the US. I think that in one way that it's it may seem bad, but on the other hand, it seems a great experience, great learning experience for Chinese companies. So they will be able to use minimum capital and minimum sort of investment, learn how to do drug discovery, how to move into clinic. I think that learning experience itself is going to be pay dividends down the road. So I'll just start with that.
Can we just add a third one to that, what you talked about? Is China, should we view China as the biotech industry being Me Too's or Me Betters, as you talk about? Or should we start to think about China doing their own innovation and really bringing the drugs that are discovered here rather than simply Me Too's from somewhere else?
So I've been monitoring innovative companies from China as well as academic research in China and Asia Pacific in general. I believe that China is in the early stage of innovation, and this might be a turning point for China, turning more from a more Me Too, Me Better environment to more innovative, more focus on innovations. If you look at the number of truly innovative companies in China, probably it's much less than there are in the US. But if you look at the number of quality academic publications, those, if you look at Nature, Cell, or Science in recent years, almost every issue there is a major paper published from Chinese associated labs. And that actually gives us very strong confidence that the next wave of innovation will come out of China because of those excellent academic research. So that's one aspect for that. The second aspect is Leonard's talked about the amount of money from VC, from government, put into biotech or healthcare. That's another driver for innovative company growth. And then the third driver for that is a lot of returnees with pharma experience, drug discovery experience from US, also from the pharma companies, R&D center in China, for example, Lilly, GSK, and Novartis, that they are leaving major pharma in China, start their own company. So I think these are three major factors that will drive innovation in China in the coming years. And then, of course, we shouldn't forget that there's a huge market need, which is eventually the eventual force for the growth.
So you do see a movement away from bio-betters to more homegrown innovation?
It is moving.
You think it's moving that way?
I would also like to add a couple of comments because I focus on clinical stage assets, right? So actually, there are not many opportunities actually from China come to our attention just simply because the Chinese opportunity, Chinese assets, relatively early global clinical development. Secondly, it's Me Too. Well, we're not trying to say Me Too is bad. Just simply, when you talk about Me Too, you have to, someone already set a bar for you. You have to show a meaningful differentiation, not only differentiation, but meaningful differentiation that's meaningful to the patient, but also to payers, right? So those are the key things, and you know, I know that we talk about Me Too's, but let's review what's happening in the list of all the opportunities licensed from Chinese biotech. Eon Wolfgang used to have a list of those opportunities. I'll just basically take a look. Almost 20 opportunities licensed from China, 85% oncology. So clearly oncology is a hot area. That's kind of in line with what's happening in the US. Obviously BMS just acquired Celgene for oncology. So clearly that's in line with what's happening in the US. But if you look at the clinical stage, clinical proof of concept before or after, most of the assets actually before. So that clearly tell you that there's so much things the Chinese biotech need to do to really maximize the value by delivering by an active clinical stage and show the clinical proof of concept. But by then you can talk about your differentiation not only from clinical data perspective but also from development strategy, from regulatory perspective, and also commercial differentiation. And one of the assets actually among the 19 deals did by Chinese pharma to global companies, actually there are 5 of them is actually PD-1s. So I know that we talk about PD-1. PD-1 is unique in a way that it's a backbone therapy in oncology. And secondly, a lot of large pharma don't have PD-1. They need to have access to PD-1 in order for them to do combination trials. And third is from market access perspective. If both drugs from their combination therapy come from one company, they have huge market access advantage when they try to negotiate with payer, and also that pricing wise is lower. So from all those perspectives, that's what's happening right now. The question is what's going forward. Is PD-1 going to repeat itself by another drug class? No one knows. It could. Maybe there's another backbone therapy coming up, but right now we just don't know.
Sure, and in the United States, it's the same way. Most of what we see is either cancer or rare diseases, orphan diseases. They're 2 popular ways that biotechs are developing drugs. Simon, I want to go back to you for a second. You have a PD-1. I see a PD-1. I see it once a day. Somebody comes in and talks to me about their PD-1. And they all kind of look the same to me. Is your PD-1 just another Me Too or Me Better, or how are you going to get people interested in your PD-1 when there's so many of them out there? How do you?
I think both areas, the 3D, we all develop the PD-1 or PD-L1 drugs, and for us. We co-developed with one of our Chinese partners, Suzhou Alphabet. So our compound, because we wanted to make it to be better of PD-1, PD-L1s by 2 aspects. The first is the dosing form, because our PD-1 is an antibody Fc fusion. So that can be administered subcutaneously. So as far as we know, that would be the worldwide first subcu version of PD-1, PD-L1 globally. We see that's addressed a lot of pinpoint, especially for the data we see from the Herceptin assay version. For example, for Roche actually is changing a lot of their IV form of their antibody drugs into the assay version. For Herceptin, I think Roche stopped to publish the data until 2016. That's about 3 or 4 years since the first launch of their assay version of Herceptin. But by then, in the first 3 years, the assay version already take up about half of the IPO version's market. So this is a huge benefit for the assay version, especially considering its combo opportunities with other oral drugs. And secondly, we deliver another kind of effort by choosing the right indication. For a lot of China biotech, if they want to beat the MNC, they need to choose the indication carefully. One way we think China will have a huge resources to do that is from the liver cancer and biliary cancer. Because China have only 1/6 of the world population, but contributes more than half of the deaths from liver cancer and biliary cancer. So we really wanted to leverage that kind of resources. We are currently doing the first worldwide phase 3 clinical trial for the biliary tract cancer.
Got it. And I do want to hit the topic of governance in a minute, but Scott, maybe you guys started in a different way. Maybe you could just take a minute and kind of run through the history of Hemlius and how you got started and how it's ended up now to filing an IPO.
Yeah, I just want to go back to your previous question in terms of the challenge and difficulty we're facing as compared to the US biotech. I think it's been quite a long journey for us. The most difficult, or one of the most difficult things we've encountered is really the regulatory environment, regulatory process. It's really not
Here?
in China.
In China, yeah.
For example, it took us 27 months to get our first IPO approved by the CFD, the NPA. Okay? And it took a lot of persuasion and meetings to get the rolling submission agreed upon by the CD. And it took us 2 years to pass the board to communicate with the CFDA people to allow us to use the single-use technology for manufacturing. But I guess the thing is, the challenge for entrepreneurs or CEOs in China is really whether you have the courage to be the leader, whether you are willing to do the right thing, whether you are to be the first to eat the crab in Chinese, we always say the first crab eater. So I think that's really something that whenever you want to start a company in China, you have to think about whether you want to stick to the right practice, according to the Western standards, in terms of technology, in terms of GXP, or you go back to what China used to do. For Helios, we have always been willing to be the leader, to challenge the status quo, to try to new approach according to the technology, according to the international regulatory standards and practices. That's what Helios is all about.
And do you think you've been able to try to be a leader and be first because of your relationship with Fosun, or is that relationship maybe, how does that work?
Yeah, that gives us an extra sense of security, I guess. The market goes up and down. In the bear market, we still can count on Fosun to get us project funded. I think that's the difference, and that allows us to aim high at a very early stage. When we started, we already aimed to be the #1 in China, because we have the belief that if we do well, Fosun will continuously to support us. It's going to also be true. But of course, we have the capability to raise funds outside as well. But starting from day one, we try to be #1, rather than just making money.
One of the things we focus on a lot in the United States is corporate governance, and how are companies being set up, what's their scientific advisory board look like, what's their board of directors look like, what's their venture capitalists look like, and it's a pretty incestuous group in the United States where people kind of know everybody. I went to your guys' websites. There was no listing of a board of directors. So I want to ask the big guy, the pharma guys here, how do you think about governance when so much of it is just simply CEO owned and no outside people? Does that matter to you? Doesn't it matter to you? In the United States, it's an important thing.
So whenever we evaluate a company, whether it's from China or from the US, we really certainly knowing board members or CEO, CSO will help. But eventually it's the data. We look at the quality data and also novelty of the ideas and competitive programs. So that's not that different from what we do in China or in Asia. We really look at a particular company for their programs, how innovative those programs are, and how that complement our internal portfolio. And from there, we will do due diligence, and then certainly due diligence include data quality, but also look at finance and all other aspects that you may refer to. That's from what we do. So it's not a big issue to us. Definitely, to help the company grow, particularly grow in the global arena, having a more seasoned board and well-recognized board to help them is a plus. I think most the traditional company probably don't have that. I've seen a number of new companies, startups in China. Their board are fairly decent, and many of them are as good, if not better, than some of the U.S. companies.
I would generally agree with what colleague said there. Yes, traditionally, Chinese companies don't really value that very much, but with some of the early biotechs that decided to go on NASDAQ, those companies started to have quality boards, and most recently Hong Kong Stock Exchange really started last year. Now these companies start to have quality boards. Yes, the majority local companies still don't have quality boards. It takes some time to get as perhaps same level as US-based companies. I think we really should look at China in an evolutional sort of viewpoint. After all, the US biotech company has about 40 years history, maybe even more than 40 years. In China, it's only 10 years, about. So you can see how much China has made progress and how much they have done. Once again, I think the speed in China and the willingness to try different things and fail quickly is mind-boggling. I think it's hard to imagine what it's going to look like in another 5 years or 10 years. Yes, I would say true innovation will come about and standardization will come about, and I think all those who we're looking for will be there in another 5-10 years.
One probably slightly different thoughts regarding the board from Chinese biotech companies. And obviously, a large pharma, in order for us to do deals, oftentimes we have a connection with venture capital, actually, including Dennis and Aisling. We've been having meetings every year at JP Morgan, and that kind of help set up the foundation for our dialogue deal, because that trust relationship is something critical. As you know, during the negotiation, it could be hostile in a way, and if you have that extra communication channel, it makes things much easier, right? And I can, maybe Dennis, you can comment on this, but I see that the relationship with the venture capital is very important, for big pharma and do deals. But with Chinese biotech, I don't see that happening. I notice that, from their perspective, we haven't seen that much. Maybe it will be changing going forward.
I think the world is evolving on this question in the sense that 10 or 15 years ago, there were probably 10 really good venture funds around. People like Kleiner Perkins or NPM or Orbimed, maybe us. And what I'm noticing now is that there's a lot of new investors into the sector that I don't know. And I don't know how that's going to ultimately play out. But I want to go back to the big pharma guys for a minute. A lot of times when you start to do a partnership deal, it turns into a merger or an acquisition. You get into the due diligence, you get into it, you say, hey, let me acquire you instead of partnering with you or whatever. And we see that a fair amount in the U.S. and most of the most of the big acquisitions happen with the bigger companies and end up acquiring the smaller companies. So far in China, we have not seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not seen a lot of merger and acquisition activity. We see you guys that are here and being very active in terms of doing deals with these companies, but we haven't seen you yet take the leap and say, we're going to acquire these companies. Do you, I think it's a really good point that the United States has 40 years of experience in biotech and China's 10 years, so it is an evolutionary process. But do you see the business development role sometime morphing into a kind of an M&A role instead of just a licensing role?
I don't think we distinguish in the beginning of the engagement, distinguish between in-licensing, merger, or JV. We really look at the quality of the program, whether the program is novel or not, and how that program complements with our internal strategy or need. And then based on that, we'll decide together with the partner whether this is a licensing deal, whether this should be a co-development deal, or this should be a merger acquisition. Because what the partner needs, maybe the partner does not want to have a license, purely licensed, or maybe they prefer to be acquired. So we'll discuss that based on their need when there's a mutual interest on the asset.
Got it. And in a couple of minutes, we're just going to open it up for some questions, so if anybody has any. But let me, I'd like to hear from your perspective, because there's a perspective in the U.S. Of what happened last month with gene editing of a germline with the 2 children that were born. And I'd be curious, as people, the 5 of you living in China, what your reaction to that is, or what your reaction to what the world's reaction was to that. Are we going to see more of that? Is China the Wild West here and anything goes? Was that a good idea to do that? Was it a bad idea to do it? How do you as locals see what happened there?
I'd like to take the question, because I used to work for the PE firm, and from that perspective, I would say we are as shocked as the Western people regarding this accident, and actually there's some scientist by himself took advantage of the loopholes from the system, which is actually involved the several parties, not just the scientist's own team, but as well as a hospital and a lot of families. They don't have the common sense. As a kind of former PE investor, I used to invest a lot of Chinese private hospitals. So there's a lot of Chinese private hospitals. They don't have really the tax regulation in regards of the scientific clinical trials, because before nobody really doing clinical trials at those private hospitals. We have like 600 GCP validated clinical trials sites in China, and but most of them are actually public hospitals. So that's why I said that's kind of the tragedy happened due to there's still some kind of loopholes, regarding not just on the R&D or regulatory level. This also happens on there's kind of regulation gap between the different parties.
How do the rest of you guys see that development?
I think, as you said, it's definitely a sense of a Wild West. Earlier, a comment about lower barrier to try different things. It has the positive aspect of it, obviously, but here's something not so positive. I guess we also know China probably has the most gene editing cell therapy clinical trials around the world. So some of those easy access to patients, easy access to money, lack of rigorous ethical standard, rigorous rules and guidelines is definitely there. I think, again, there's positives of this, but there are also not so positive. I think in general, the reaction in China is consider this as a negative. This is a damage to the reputation of a scientist, and perhaps even bigger damage to society overall. I think even the government reacted negatively, I should say. So they're trying to do an investigation, trying to how come China strengthen their guidelines and rules to control this kind of thing going forward.
I agree it's a tragic and it's a failure of the system. I agree with that. The positive thing is from this, people will learn, government will enforce.
Yeah. And we just have a few minutes left. Does anybody want to raise anything? I'll keep going then. Oh, go ahead.
Does any of the companies present here, do they use RNA inhibition, and is that catching fire, siRNA in China, or how's that working so far out there?
The question is RNA becoming an important kind of technology here in China, like it has been, starting to be in the United States. So I don't know how to answer that.
For research or for therapeutic?
Well, Long Island just got theirs for research. So
To get a drug, are there companies in China working with RNA to get a drug approved?
I'm certainly aware of a few companies working on that. They're not as advanced as Alnylam, as you say, or Arrowhead or others, but the technology is pretty simple, really. So yeah, there's a number of companies working on it, on similar targets at the moment.
Yeah, there's a park called RNA Therapeutic Park outside Shanghai, in West, started by Professor Zhai Liang from Peking University, and he also has a company there. Then there's another company involved by Medal and student in Guangzhou. So there are a number.
Aaron, you want to say anything about that, or same?
Actually, because I focus on clinical stage, so far I haven't seen anything.
Haven't seen it. Looking forward, and China trying to become a major player on the world stage and made unbelievable progress in the last few years. What do you see going wrong where the Chinese biotech industry does not develop the way that you hope it would? And are there issues with the smaller Chinese biotech companies that really have to be addressed before China can be a major player in the biotech world stage? Scott, I don't know, you want to take a shot at that? Or?
I think it's still the ability to attract international talents.
Talent.
I think it's still the most difficult thing facing by the local companies, because not only want to hire someone who has experience, technological, managerial experience, but also the person needs to be willing to move back to China. So there are multiple challenges there. And also in Beijing, you have to face the air pollution, all those kind of environmental issues. So it's difficult. That.
So one of the ways that China biotech industry may not develop is because there's a lack of talent to help get it there. I think that's what you're saying?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think especially experienced, having 10, 20 years experience in the US or Europe.
Yeah, I think the biggest risk might be geopolitical, anything else at this time. And with the number of investment China already made, with the number of returnees, both in the academic front, in the biotech front, in the investment front, I think nothing would stop China from growing its healthcare ecosystem.
Well, there has to be some things that have to be done, right? I mean, you can't say it. You got to give some reason. Talent might be a reason. I may make the argument that China doesn't have enough experienced, qualified people to take programs through the clinic and get them approved. And that might be a
I
bottleneck.
disagree with that.
Disagree?
Yes, I disagree. I think China may not have that many talented people in pharma R&D, but they're enough. And there are ways to, they are all actually doing that to attract overseas talent to go to China anyway. So as I said, I believe that China will grow. I don't foresee really significant risk factor ahead. Maybe I'm too optimistic.
What do you guys think? Where's China Biotech going to go wrong? What do they have to do to get a major player on the world stage?
Okay, I throw out one. So for me, it's whether Chinese government have a sustained commitment to healthcare industry. It's such a long game. It requires so much capital. At the moment, it's really hot. There's a lot of venture money coming in. But many of these companies will fail. Many of these companies probably won't make money. So how the government policy, even currently, some policies are some price control on innovative medicine, certainly generic first, and potentially genetic medicine as well. Without a commitment to reward innovation from the Chinese government, that in 5-10 years, if it doesn't do that, it can kill the industry.
Can I take exception with that for a second? A number of years ago, Germany and France wanted to build their biotech industry. And Germany, in 1 year, I can't remember, it was 2008 or 2009, there was more biotech startups within a 20-mile radius of Munich than anywhere else in the world. France did the same thing. I'm trying to think of where a government helped an industry develop that where it really worked. I'm thinking about the United States. I mean, the United States has no real government help to build the industry in terms of direct financial support, things like that.
I'm not talking about direct financial support. It's more about a commitment to pay for innovation. So U.S. are definitely paying for innovation, right? European government no longer. China is willing to pay at the moment, can maintain that kind of commitment for next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and not just 3-4 years, right? This is an industry that takes a long time to mature.
So what would happen in the following situation? There was a gene therapy drug approved in the United States for an inherited retinal disease. This was Spark Therapeutics. And that treatment cost $850,000. And everybody went, whoa. And then they looked at the pipeline and said, we have kind of 60 drugs, we in the United States have about 60 drugs that are curative, one-time shots, whether it's an RNA issue or gene therapy or cell therapy. What would happen if a U.S. biotech came over to China and said, I'm going to charge $850,000 for this procedure? What does China do?
I'll take that question because as mentioned, I used to be an investor. I also invest some of the rare disease companies like Spark and Sarepta. And so I did a fair amount of study on the different policy, pricing, rare disease between China and U.S. So I think back 3 years ago, there's kind of emerging trend for Chinese investors to invest in a rare disease company in China. But I think the trend got disappeared in about less than half a year. And there used to be a lot of forums, focusing on rare disease, but I think now all of them are gone. So in China, I think for the European and US, I think the most expensive pricing for rare disease happened in Europe. It's 1.6 million euro. The reason they can do that is because they are covered by a lot of foundations and the insurance. Those kind of payer is not used in China.
I'm getting this signal that we're out of time, so maybe I could just ask one last question, and it's a yes or no answer or whatever. Does the current tension between the Chinese government and the U.S. government going to affect the Chinese biotechnology community?
Yes, but not in terrible big way.
I agree.
You agree, yes, but not in a terrible big way?
Yes, not but not in a big way.
Agree.
Yes, I have to go with that.
Say it again?
I agree.
That's interesting. Okay, so the issue of the political stuff that's going on in China versus the U.S. and the tariffs and the rest of it, you guys seem to think it might have some impact, but not a huge impact on the development of the Chinese biotech industry. I'd like to thank our panelists for a very enlightening kind of thoughts about what to do in China, and wish everybody a good rest of the conference. So thank you.